The public library, and we thank everyone for coming out tonight and participating in democracy. I'd like to thank the Cedar Rapids Public Library for that using the facility in partnership with them doing this. And you are attending a historical event. This is the first time in the city of Cedar Rapids that people of African descent have put on candidates form. And our belief was that we get so hooked up with the presidential races, which are important, but local races are more important than national races because local things directly affect our lives. And we felt that it was time for us to put our input in the city government rather than when a crisis comes up, there's no crisis going, we can question and we can examine our candidates and see what they say on certain issues that are important to the African American community. Now, this forum is not just exclusive to the African American community. Everybody's welcome, and obviously everybody here, when you try to keep no night out, so I appreciate that. And briefly, One Strong was a group that came about to a town hall meeting that was held by the Iowa Democratic Black Caucus. At that time, Karl was the chairman of the Black Caucus, and James Wood was the vice chair. I'm currently the vice chair of the Iowa Democratic Black Caucus. Our town hall meeting, and we go all over the state. And generally, the basic problems facing the black community in the state of Iowa are primarily concerns around basically violence, jobs, housing, education, healthcare, and mental health. In Cedar Rapids, our problems we saw were youth violence, jobs, mental health, and education. Pretty much it's pretty general around the state. We all got the same problems, but each community ranks them a little bit different. One thing that One Strong did, we felt that the problem with youth violence was so bad in our city was that crisis. Evidently, we asked our city council to invite the Centers for Disease Control to come to Cedar Rapids and study violence as a public health problem. Because we believe that prevention is much cheaper. And many of our members and many people connected to us who we have actually got a chance to see young people down the street. So, not going to go down that road with you, but when you see a young person down the street at your feet, that has a whole other different effect on. So we felt that this was important, so we started the initiative to bring the CDC to Cedar Rapids to study this as a public health problem. We believe that prevention is cheaper. At this time in this country, we know that the problem with opioids is a health problem. Now, we don't want this problem to get so big that it has to reach the white community before we believe that it's a health problem. We need to get this because everything that happens in our community eventually happens in all other communities. So if we deal with prevention, we all citizens, we ought to be able to help bring each other up. And again, I want to thank you for coming. And our moderator tonight will be Karl Cassell, Mr. Cassell. I know him since he was a little boy.
All right.
And that's no put down. And that's no put down. He turned into a very fine young man. He turned into a fine guy. I've seen him grow up. I know his grandmother, nurse, Robinson, was the first black in the city to become a registered nurse. She graduated from the St. Luke's nursing school. On her first day at Berkeley Hospital, she was pointed to the mop closet, and she was told to mop the floor. And what I told Paul, he has been able to be over 3 different organizations in his young life. Horizons, James Boyd, and the Civil Rights Commission. So I told him, I said, Karl, that's a long jump from how your grandma was treated. I said, that's a long jump. And that said that that's an improvement. There's still much improvement to be made. We aren't arrived yet, so let's not get the thing that we're arrived. We're still trying to get there. And Miss Breeanna Gibson, she's a college student. I don't know as much about her, but she's from Chicago Heights, Illinois. majored in economics, African American studies, and she's majored in history. And she's also co-chair of the College Diversity Committee. And at this point in time, thank you for coming. I'm going to turn it over to our moderator that will give you the ground rules.
Good evening, our engaged citizens, and welcome to the final 2017 Mayoral debate for Cedar Rapids. I am Breeanna Gibson, and this is Cassell, and we will be your moderators for this evening's panel.
And if we could, if you have cell phones, please turn them off or silent. Thank you once strong for sponsoring constructive dialogue during this evening's event and for the opportunity for each candidate to articulate their message to the public.
We welcome and thank you, candidates, for heeding the call of leadership and participating in this year's mayoral race. We wish each of you the best in the race.
To the audience tonight, thank you for recognizing the civic movement of engaging candidates for mayor and hopefully culminating in allies. You will have ample opportunity to ask questions of the candidates in a few short minutes.
If you are connected via social media, thank you and spread the word to those who aren't currently listening. Now we'd like to lay the ground rules for you all. Candidates will have 2 minutes for introductions of themselves and any comments they might want to express. And we would like for you to answer just any question that we ask or the public asks, we ask in 2 minutes. After the 2 minutes, and we would like to stick to that matter.
Try not to interrupt one another during answering the questions. If you are mentioned in someone else's comments, you also have 1 minute for a audience. Please ask questions in a succinct and organized manner. If you must tell a short story, be as brief and to the point as you possibly can. Now, for the moment we all waited for, let's have a great day and fruitful dialogue.
So, let's approach the first question. For the last few years, our city has been plagued with violence among our youth, bullying in school, and suicide, which is in itself another form of violence. Many health professionals, organizations, including Armstrong, believe that violence is a public health crisis. These violence is a public.
We're going to give you guys 2 minutes to introduce yourself.
We're ready. We introducced ourselves a few times.
We'll just do it.
In 1 minute, if you need, and then we'll get to the question. But we do want to give, for those who are here, we want to give each one of them introduction.
Is there any particular order? Okay.
Mine? Yeah, thank you. I'm Scott Olson, and thank you all for being here tonight. And many of you have been to some of the forums already, and so hopefully we have a lot of time for questions. And so I'm going to keep my comments brief. I came here to Cedar Rapids 56 years ago with lots of hope for the future. And what I've been amazed by is the impact this city has had on my life, and it has been fantastic. And I want to protect some of those best things that we have in our community, but we're all here, and this forum was formed because we have issues we still have to address to make this community even better, and we need to work together to do that. I've had the privilege of being a founding board member, 44-year member of 4 Oaks and 3 other nonprofit agencies. Those agencies work together to work with youth, with families, housing issues, other things that are very important to this community. And that's the type of approach that needs to be done because it has to be a concerted, comprehensive effort to solve any issue. And I'm sure we'll be talking about some of those issues tonight. As a business owner, and I've had the chance to create with others 6 different businesses, it's also important to learn about the economics that impact the youth and others in our community are important as a business owner and for the future of our city. And with 6 years on the council, I feel that I can bring items to the table. One of the things that I hope to do is that by working together, there's promise and hope for all. And I was very intrigued by the statement at the bottom, and I think this was on all the things that you picked up. Demands are made on the street, decisions are made at the table. And that couldn't be clearer than what we need to do as a city and myself as mayor. I've learned through my experiences, whether it's in public service, in nonprofits, in business, that you have to listen, you have to come up with creative ideas, you have to build consensus, you have to find a way to fund whatever that effort is, but most importantly, you have to put together a team to act. My goal as mayor is working with the city council, our commissions, all these organizations to put together ideas that will work and make things happen. And then I feel that we'll continue to improve as a community. And tonight, I look forward to hearing your concerns because that's part of this effort of joining together. Thank you.
My name is Jorel Robinson. Thank you guys all for coming out. Thank the candidates for being here. We've been doing a lot of these forums. It is truly a pleasure, either way, to be out in front of you today. It's time for change in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. I was born and raised here. I was born here in 1987, 30 years old. Young, energetic, have ideas, very passionate, and want to be involved in the city. You can go to my website to get more information, and as we go through the night, you can kind of figure out who I am and those kinds of things. But what I want you guys to start to think about as a community is, are the everyday people in Cedar Rapids truly involved in this process? Do we have a voice in what is going up and going down in our city? Everyday people, minorities, are we really truly involved in the big decisions that are happening every day for us? And so I thought, what better time than now? Why wait? Great people in history did not wait until they were 50, 60, 70 to be involved in their communities and make a difference. And that's what I'm doing today. When former President Obama said, get a clipboard, that's exactly what I did. And when I look back at this time in the world and I say to myself, what did you do? I'll be able to say I did something. I got up, I stood for what I believed in. I love this community. I don't plan on going anywhere else. And so I'm running for mayor to be your mayor and to show you that as a community we can care for each other. We can create a place that is very inclusive and exciting and new. And it's time that we do that. And we have all the resources to do it right here.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for One Strong, Mr. Bernard, for hosting us tonight. And thank you, fellow candidates, for being here. And of course, to the community for coming out to hear what we have to say. So the main reason why I'm running is because I am concerned about the lack of representation and the droves of young people that are leaving the city to seek opportunities elsewhere. I think as a city we need to get younger, we need to be able to create some more opportunities that really address the issue of getting young people involved. I think it's really important and critical that we approach youth engagement directly and as quick as possible, because by the time that we take a chance to say, oh, we'll let young people come and seek out for help or for representation from us, then it's too late and we've lost them already. So we need to engage them when the interest is high and when the stakes are high as well. So one of my main motivations to be able to run and hoping to be a trailblazer for my fellow peers, and hopefully that I can inspire and catch some of the eyes to take part in the responsibility and ownership in their city and make it great. With that said, this is a collaborative and a collective effort, so we're all in it together. So I want to make sure that I address this. And what better way than having a young person who's involved in part of the nitty-gritty work to be able to let you know that there is a lack of youth representation and engagement. So hopefully that you can get on board and support me on November 7th and elect me as your next mayor.
Hi, I'm Monica Vernon, and I grew up here in Cedar Rapids and married a fellow Cedar Rapids kid, my husband Bill, and we've raised 3 daughters here and built a business. And here's the deal, I just love Cedar Rapids. I'm running for mayor because I feel like we came a long way since that '08 flood, but I know there's so much further that we have to go. There's so much more to be done. And we are really at a critical juncture here as we choose our pathway forward, and that's really it. We've had great crowds. This is our 5th forum in 10 days. And it really is about all of you choosing our path forward. I was part of that strong leadership that really helped us come back as a better city after the devastating flood. And I'll bring my strong, experienced, and caring leadership to achieve more for the citizens. You know, we've got to get after these streets and make sure that we get repairs done in a timely manner and continue maintenance. We've got to find flood protection system for both sides of the river. We've got to solve that challenge. And we've got to continue to grow jobs and build our economy while we're doing all of that. And really, for me, it's about leaving no corner of any neighborhood in this community behind. We just have to make sure we're including everybody and getting them involved in the process. You know, as an 8-year city council member and 6 years as your mayor pro tem, which was the vice mayor, I'll be able to get right in there, roll up my sleeves, and go to work on day one. As a founder and a former CEO of a local small business, I know how to invest in people and create jobs and invest in that workforce. And as a lifelong community volunteer, I know how important it is to involve and get together, get people to the table, whether it's individuals from all parts of our community or organizations, to solve problems and create opportunities for others. You know, it's your city. I want to work with all of you in all the neighborhoods to make Cedar Rapids the best place it can possibly be. Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you for being here tonight. Thanks to One Strong for putting this forum on. I'm going to take my introduction time to talk about what I've done, because I think a good measure of how somebody is going to perform in the future is to look at what they've done. And I have been in the past the police chief in Cedar Rapids, and some of you know I've been the director for the Department of Correctional Services, parole and probation activities. And I've also been the president of the American Parole and Probation Association. And in those roles, I've had the opportunity to work nationally with some very fine organizations that are interested in human rights and human dignity. One of those was the National Hire Network, which was a subdivision of the Legal Action Center of New York City, which is a liberal think tank. And they asked me to come on board with them because they wanted to address the issues that were facing people that were formerly incarcerated. And the issues we were looking at were voting rights, getting back to voting rights. We were looking at employment, how to, as a matter of fact, we were the first organization in the nation that recommended that at the national and state level we ban the box asking that employment question, are you a felon? And that has taken hold and has been implemented in law in many states now. And we also addressed employment issues, and we addressed issues around mental health issues. And I can tell you that I didn't stop by having the philosophy from a national organization. I brought those things back to Cedar Rapids. And we did create reentry housing for people who were formerly incarcerated to come and live with their parent or their children and be a parent to them. And we did create a mental health center in Cedar Rapids, the first corrections mental health center in Iowa and probably the Midwest. And we did lobby the governor to make an administrative rule to give people their voting rights back, which were later lost subsequently. Those are the things that we have done and that we were good at. We looked at Iowa, which had the unremarkable distinction of the worst percentage of incarceration for African Americans in the country, and we were not glad to be part of that system. So we implemented many programs, what we called our Children of Promise program, to give children a pathway when they hit 18, they could be successful. We created the housing programs I previously mentioned. Some of you know that I was instrumental in creating the neighborhood network that exists in Cedar Rapids today. Those are the things that we can do. And when we did those things, we started seeing the incarceration rate from the 6th district in Cedar Rapids in particular dropping. And even today, it's still the lowest incarceration rate for any district in the state, and particularly the revocation rate because of the treatment programs that we put in place. Those are the things that I have done. More recently, I've worked at the national level again, looking at issues around justice reform and human dignity. And I look to participate in that further and strengthen that for Cedar Rapids if I'm elected mayor. Those are the things that I have done and that I will do.
I'm Brad Hart. I'm running for mayor to serve this great city and everyone in it. I'll use my professional training as an analytical problem solver. The leadership skills I've developed by chairing, leading almost a dozen community organizations and causes, and my real knowledge and love of this community to help fix our streets, protect us from future flooding, to strengthen our neighborhoods, to provide all the housing options that a community our size should have, to grow our economy with high quality, high paying jobs, and to expand our development beyond downtown and Nubo so everyone in Cedar Rapids can benefit from new investment. And I'll work hard to make sure that Cedar Rapids gets its fair share, that we're treated in Des Moines and DC as the second largest city in Iowa. I'm not a politician, and I have not served as an elected official yet, but I have served this community in a number of ways over the last 25 years, all without pay or public recognition. I chaired the Chamber of Commerce immediately after the 2008 flood. That meant going to Washington, D.C. and Des Moines to lobby for flood recovery help. I also have chaired several human service organizations, Alternative Services, Horizons, Young Parents Network, United Way. That service has given me a real strong understanding of our community and our strengths and our weaknesses, so I know that I can bring people to the table and serve our entire community. So I'm asking for your support and your vote on November 7th. Thank you.
Karl, stop me at 2 minutes, okay? Because it's kind of hard to see across over there to know when the 2 minutes is up. So appreciate if you just interrupt, that's fine. I'll appreciate that. My name is Kris Gulick, and I've been on the City Council for the last 12 years. It's been my privilege to serve our community. I started a business back 15 years ago and have owned my own business since January when I sold that business. And one of the things that I've learned during the course of my 12 years on the City Council is the complexity of that organization. It's a big organization, and social community problems are difficult things to solve, and it takes a long time to solve many of them. One of the things that I was really instrumental in doing was making sure that we put together a long-term strategic plan, setting goals, and then not only setting those goals, but being disciplined enough to work on those goals and stick to them. And I believe that's part of the reason why we have the positive momentum that we have created in our community. I have the opportunity to be on the Iowa League of Cities as the president, and I'm on the current National League of Cities Board of Directors. And that exposure has provided me an opportunity to learn from other communities and what's working in their communities, what's not working in their communities, and bring some of those things back to our community here and try to tweak them a little bit for our own uses. That's been incredibly valuable for me, and I would continue to do that work because I think that's important for us to try to make our community one of the best in the country and the envy of other communities around the country. We have to do work on our economy and make sure that we're continuing to grow our economy. That's a critical component because all of the other things that we'd like to accomplish as a community really require a growing and successful economy. And that goes all the way down from the top of the largest organizations down to the mom and pop startup organizations that help our community be successful. And creating those jobs that are available for citizens to help them provide economic mobility so that they can move up in their career over the course of their life and really have an opportunity to be able to pay for the things that they have, to be able to live in our community and have a successful life living here. Both quality of life as the business of the city of Cedar Rapids, and I will do my best to make sure that we have a high quality of life for all citizens in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will mention Tim Pritchett, the last candidate at a previous engagement this evening. His daughter is a senior high school. He's the only one that has my influence. And with that, we'll get to our first question. Also, after the first question is asked and answered, if you are an audience member and want to ask a question, please stand in the aisle and make sure we get a microphone for you.
Okay, so I'll be asking the first question. How do you view violence in the community and how would you address it?
I didn't hear the whole question. I'm sorry.
How do you view violence in the community, and how would you address it?
Okay. Whoever wants to answer? Okay. I'd be glad to answer. Some of you know I chaired the SET task force on law enforcement and gun violence in the community. I think, and I have said many times, Karl, you were in those meetings as well, that I believe that we need to do what we can right now to curb gun violence as it exists today. So it is an immediate concern. And we gave the police department a set of tasks to do that we thought would start turning the corner on gun violence. We found out that carrying a gun for some young people was a status symbol, and we were concerned about how that played out in the schools because some kids were taking guns to schools as well. So we developed some intervention programs that the police department and the schools are currently using. But I believe, and I've said to the SET task force many times, we really have to start at the beginning. We have to get to kids that are at risk. We have to give them a pathway to success so that when they hit 18, they want to become a teacher or a firefighter or something else, maybe a good welder, but they aren't going to end up in prison when they hit 18. So we need to think about how we interact in our communities and in our neighborhoods, and we make sure that we can create success. I was impressed today talking to Dr. Buck for a little bit that the school district is also heading that same direction, and I'm impressed that they're thinking of bringing these partnerships and success programs to the schools.
Well, I think when you're an elected official, the absolute #1 thing is safety for all of your community, for every neighborhood, for every person in it. And violence, any kind of violence, is just absolutely unacceptable. And gun violence, absolutely unacceptable. So I think you have to right away embrace, hey, we've got a problem here. And, but also embrace it with an open heart and an open mind. What is the problem? Where is it going on? And I think the SET task force made a lot of progress toward, with some solutions, some things we can do. But I really am a believer, and we've got to take action on it. Too many times we get a group of citizens together and they spend a lot of time and they figure something out, and then we don't take enough action, or we don't follow it all the way through. I think we've got to A, do that, and I think B, it can't be a one and done. It shouldn't just be owned by the task force. It has to be a solution to violence, gun violence in our community. It has to be owned by everyone. It has to be owned by the entire city council. It has to be owned by the entire city staff, and it really has to be owned by our entire community. We've got to work together in every neighborhood so that all people feel safe.
Excuse me. So I wish it was just as easy as saying, oh, violence is bad, violence is black and white. Lots of it is in the gray area. And I definitely echo the sentiment with Monica that any form of violence is unacceptable. And it is an issue that divides our community. If we are going to get better and move forward, we certainly cannot have any form of that happening in our community. But to go even beyond that, we must really address the issue at the stem and start to build and develop understanding rather than just tolerance. The easiest part is setting up a task force or creating different agencies that will try to address the issue. But really, what we need to do and focus on is community involvement, making sure that we are in the neighborhoods and making sure that each of us take that personal responsibility to correct something that we see as wrong. If we don't want it for our household, we definitely don't want it for our city, because eventually that is going to come around and it'll be a poison in our society, and that could have been corrected if we had addressed the situation right there and then. And also meaningful action, not just setting the task force, but having meaningful actions and then following through. So all of these things will help us build understanding instead of tolerating it.
So violence is a horrible thing, and sadly it happens in all communities. What we got to look at is the real issue. You look at history, no matter where you look, where there is poverty, lack of education, you will see violence. We've got to look at, as a city, how can we affect those areas in a positive way? And more policing and patrolling is not necessarily the answer. Matter of fact, it may prove that it doesn't bring any more safety to an officer. We should be really looking at how to create that real relationship of protecting and serving. The community and the police department, it's very much a two-way street. We're wanting the citizens to speak up when there's violence in the community. If an officer, if there's violence with an officer or we view something as wrong, we also want the police officers to stand up and say, hey, that was wrong. It's a very much a two-way street, and it's on us as human beings, as people, to start really communicating with each other and letting each other know how we feel. In our community right now, in the summertime, our schools are not open. We're not running summer programs for the youth to have employment or be working in our city, and that's something that we could be doing. There's a lot of things. We have so many resources in Cedar Rapids right now. The majority of them are competing with each other rather than working together. And so the idea would be to say, take community organizations, churches, schools, the city, work together to create something where the kids in the city are excited to be here and want to be here, families as well.
No matter where you live, violence or crime is not acceptable. And we need to work through the process of putting together all of the elements that lead to that violence, and especially gun violence. One of the things at Four Oaks, we created a program called Total Child. And our theme was expect success. And we learned that just having somebody go through a treatment program and then going out on their own, the chances of them being successful was not that good. And so now we are building a program that follows them once they've left our programs all the way through by providing services and the things they need, like housing, job opportunities, other types of services to make them successful. And we have a staff person that tracks them, follows them, provides that service at no cost to them. It's the same thing when we address other issues throughout the community, because we have to work together. No one agency, you're right on, has the resources to do it alone. No church does, no nonprofit. The city has funding but doesn't have enough funding to accomplish the goals. And finally, it's down to trust. If we can't sit down like we're doing tonight and talk, then nothing will happen together. We'll each sort of go our own ways. And so we need to build trust, and that makes a difference in how people report crimes or issues in their neighborhood. 50% of my emails from my district are nuisance and other types of issues. And a lot of them are anonymous because they're afraid to talk about their neighbor. We have to end that. We have to work together. If we do it, we can make a difference. And just like that, expecting success, that theme rings well for this community. We should expect success and attack the problem as a group.
I got it. Okay. Well, this is not going to be solved overnight. We didn't get to the point in time where we are today in just the snap of a finger. This took decades in order to get into the position that we are currently in. Many of you know that I'm a CPA by trade now, but my original background was in Parks and Recreation. And one of the things that I did when I was in that field was go around the state working with communities to help establish Parks and Recreation programs in their community. Is that better?
Yes.
Thank you. Establish Parks and Recreation programs in their communities. Because ultimately, providing the youth programs for kids is critical for them if they don't have other things to do during the summer in particular. And so the idea of having those programs available, we don't have to own all of it. The city doesn't have to own all of that. We need to work with other organizations, whether that's the Boys and Girls Club, the YMCAs. It doesn't make a difference which organizations. It's just important to bring those other organizations in to help us mitigate some of those problems. Because the kids that we have that are causing some of the problems today 20 years ago, it's about 20 years ago when we eliminated a lot of the recreation programs in our community. And we need to bring some of those back, whether or not the city does that or not. That's up to us to work with our neighboring partners here on that. But we need to get back to those. Another area that we can do a huge impact on is helping provide job opportunities for kids and helping in the city, hiring some of those people, those kids that are at risk into our programs that we have in the community to help employ them. Give them a job during the summer, have them learn about the opportunity and what a job means. Really provides a good opportunity for them to learn what might be like when they get out of the real world and working environment. Another component to that would be something that I would like to see us do was have our city employees act as mentors for kids in our community. Think about that. If we had all of our community city employees spend a couple hours a week, every week for 50 weeks, that's about 70 people that would be able to help work with kids in our community. Providing them information about job opportunities, giving them a good role model, all of those are good components and very easy to put in place, and it really is just a little bit of time from our employees to help work with those kids. That could have a major impact.
As Kris mentioned, and you all know, the violence in our community is deep-seated. I applaud the SET task force and everyone who worked on that for identifying those issues, and I would certainly want the city to continue to work and have a standing committee to continue to work on those issues. The things we can do right now is continue to develop the community policing. That's where we have specific police officers patrolling and being in specific neighborhoods so that neighbors get to know them, feel comfortable working with them. Those officers also go to the monthly neighborhood association meetings so you can meet the officer there, learn about what's going on, give him or her your concerns right then. The neighborhood, we have to strengthen our neighborhoods. The neighborhood associations, the police officers bring a crime report to those meetings, and it's actually it's surprising. The crime rate in the neighborhoods that have really strong neighborhood associations is so much lower than the other neighborhoods. So we have to continue to build and strengthen those and get the neighborhood associations to figure out how to engage youth. Kris talked about jobs. Every summer, the rec department has part-time jobs, and they have a hard time filling those jobs. My son did those. They're at schools. It's almost like babysitting, teaching soccer. But it paid him some money, and it gave him something to do. We need to have the city go out to neighborhoods and have a little job fair. So the youth and their friends and their parents could come that night, get all the information, sign up for it. And maybe all of you get this, but you remember that the first time someone pays you for your services, it kind of changes your view of the world and your view of yourself. It gives you a different perspective, and you're going to be there the next day because they're counting on you. And that's a simple thing I think the city can do to help give the youth a little more hope, a little more purpose, and some money in their pocket. Thanks.
So now, if the audience has any questions, I know we have one person here, please come to the aisle, and we're going to allow the audience to ask questions if they can.
This question is a little lengthy, so I'll read fast, but it's from the Iowa Climate Control Agencies. As you know, neither the federal government nor the state government are acting to address the problems created by our working climate. 70% of cities are already dealing with the effects of climate change. City mayors are directly accountable to their constituents for their decisions and are more nimble than state and national elected officials to take decisive action. What are cities do to address climate change and set the agenda for communities and governments everywhere? What are your plans to reduce the city's carbon emissions, increase carbon absorption, so that the risk of floods and other extreme weather does not continue to increase? Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I have the mic, and I'm no expert on that by any means, but I know that the solar power is is happening here and is being installed in more and more places, including city facilities, and that's a great start. The bike lanes, I know that they're often confusing, but people are biking more and not driving their cars. The lane changes downtown are also confusing, but it's intended to create a more walkable community, and adding sidewalks in neighborhoods that didn't have before is also troublesome for them, but it gives people a chance to walk and to ride their bikes and to be more engaged and to not be out in their vehicles.
Well, I think that a very contemporary issue is the carbon emissions, and I think that was part of the question. And some of you know that there's been a national focus around, and an international focus around carbon emissions and how we're going to respond to that. I think that strong mayors in some of the communities have taken action on their own to stay with the international community on carbon emissions and what will be tolerated, which is opposed to the position that our own country has taken. And I agree that there are opportunities for alternative energy sources. Solar certainly would be one of those. Wind power would be another one, and Iowa is one of the states that's leading the nation in wind power. And so I think there are great opportunities. I'd also think that we need to look more at recycling and what we can do at the local level to end the types of items that wind up in our waste dump facilities.
Well, as a member of the City Council when the flood hit, I'm a huge believer in that we have climate change, and I think you know, the highest height of our Cedar River prior to that was what I call 20 and change. It wasn't even, I don't think, 21 yet. And that event was over 31 feet. So if you take a look at that, you know that something really big here happened here. And as mayor, you know, we don't have to reinvent all kinds of things. We know we've got to be sustainable, and that's efficiency, and many times that can save the city money. We're looking at solar arrays. We're looking at all kinds of stormwater management. People say to me, well, how come those, you know, you put fancy bricks on 3rd Street? You know, what's that all about? Well, actually, the water is seeping down through those beautiful gray bricks on the edges and helping us to keep more of that water from processing that costs the citizens money. So there's all kinds of things that the city is doing. In fact, the building that we're in has a lovely green roof. And this is one of the, you know, it's a very high LEED certified, which means that it's a very efficient, effective building. So as a mayor, I think what you do is you continue to coax and lead and educate. And that's what I did after the flood. We had a high school teacher who worked with his students to look at the amount of rainfall, not just the high events, but the amount of rainfall from 1908 to 2008. And then they did the old take the ribbon and go like this. And every single member of City Council took a look at that and could see that the trajectory was up. And so we didn't have arguments about that. We knew we had to do something. That's what the mayor does. Not all the details necessarily, staff will do that, but continues to cajole and educate and put the group together to make sure that we are making a difference on climate. Thank you.
I'll be brief, but I also want to respectfully ask us up here to try to keep our answers brief in respect of everybody's time. So, addressing that issue of climate change and also ways that the city can find solutions and practical ideas to be able to cut down on the carbon emissions simply starts with looking at everyday use. When in an age where everything is mobile, in an age where everything is digitized, some of those records, some of those city utility billing services, these things we can be practical on and immediately cut down our carbon emission and our footprint. And secondly, it's investing in public transit that is electric or renewable fuel friendly. That also cuts down the amount of time that we spend commuting in our streets. And then lastly, city looking at alternative renewable energy sources such as solar and wind that was mentioned to be able to power some of its facilities.
Cedar Rapids is the only city, I believe, in Iowa that has a sustainability officer as a staff person. And over the last year and a half, they have developed a whole series of green initiatives called Green CR that the city has been implementing, from solar to other types of activities, the only city. And we're making progress. There's now limits on how long a city vehicle can idle when somebody's not in it. They have to turn that vehicle off to save gasoline. We are becoming a star community where it's a broad base of criteria, just like we became a blue zone committee, one of the few in the country that's become a healthy community. We're also going to become a star community for energy, and it's a very complex, very difficult thing to attain. And our sustainability officer is working on a series of programs to accomplish that, so we'll become the first city in Iowa to be a star city. We talked about this facility, and all of our city facilities that were rebuilt after the flood are all highly energy efficient, LEED facilities. This is almost a net zero building. And so we're saving energy here through its design. And we have, if you see our new fleet, all of our fleets have been standardized, so they're more energy efficient. We can save on parts and maintenance. And so there's just a variety of activities. Cedar Rapids is a leader in this effort. We need to continue it, and we need to set the example for the rest of the state. And I think we're doing that. My hat's off to Jeff Pomerantz and to Ed Holthouse, who is our sustainability officer. They're making a difference. They're challenging the city council to adopt programs and policies and the staff. And so we are going to be a leader in the future of energy usage and the carbon footprint. So I'm very proud of that effort.
I'm a big believer in leading by example. In my example, in my instance, is I have a farm that's about 40 miles north of here, family farm, and it has a creek that runs through it that feeds into the Cedar River. During the course of the last several years, I've put in a riparian buffer strip to improve the water quality there. I'm working on a oxbow restoration project. I've worked with Trees Forever on putting a timber stand improvement in that area, adding more trees in the area. We have cover crops to prevent runoff in the area. Those are the things I'm doing personally as an example for us to lead our community with. We have, as was presented before, we have a sustainability coordinator who is working on this constantly. That's what their job is. I've been a supporter of our pollinator program and having areas of our community that has prairie grass instead of mowed down fine lawns. There's an adjustment there, a cultural adjustment, because I've had people say, don't you afford to mow your grass? No, that's a purpose there, and the purpose is to prevent from runoff into our community. Those are the kinds of things that I have done personally, and the types of things that I would support in our community to help in the area of climate change.
Being that I'm not an expert in this specifically, what I would say is it's very important that we do meet with the experts. We figure out every way possible as a city to be innovative in this area and also start saving. You wouldn't think that we're doing as much as we actually are, but if you look out at Kirkwood Estates, they have one of the largest solar-powered apartment complexes in the Midwest. These are things that should be success stories, exciting stories, things that we're promoting for businesses that are coming to the area to say, hey, we have a certain standard in the city, and we want you to meet that standard, as well as the residents. It's up to us. I mean, we can. It's always good the city does these kinds of things, but we've really got to start to look at each other and say, you know, I do see that the administration has gone a different way, as it was mentioned, but if it's important to you, as your mayor, it would be very important to me. And right now, I'm telling you, it's very important.
Hi, thank you all for being here. My question is about economic policy. A few of you have already mentioned the improvements the city has made to the economy since the flood in particular. And I think it's fair to say there is a certain level that government should be involved in the economy, but my concern is that eventually that involvement gets too ambitious and it ends up
I think it's always important to be building a vibrant economy. I mean, if you don't have a job, it's going to be a big problem. And having a job, having a good paying job, it is always something that helps throughout our community, especially living wages. And so I think as a city council, we could sit back and let the market do what it does. But that doesn't always work, and it hasn't always worked. So we don't do here what you hear about them doing at the state, where there's big tax giveaways of people's dollars. But the one tool that we do have is TIF, tax increment financing. And we have been actually, as a city, quite conservative in our use of that, but we have used that to spur on development. And we've done it in two different ways. One, you have to think of TIF as, but for that TIF, we might not have anything there to tax. So as a city, when a commercial building is built or an industrial building is built, it helps keep the taxes low for the citizens, for the residents, and those who own those single-family homes. So we want to keep building our base of commercial and industrial. Those are jobs. So what we do is we say, look, but for TIF, we might not have much there at all to tax. And but for TIF, it might be just a one-story building instead of a 28-story building. So I think we have charts that can show you, I just don't have it all memorized, but we are doing well with our TIF, and the state records show that we are one of the more conservative cities in our use of TIF.
It's interesting. We have more job openings online than we have all of the unemployed in our metro area. The problem we have is a lot of people don't qualify for some of those jobs. And so as a city, we need to find ways to work with our construction unions, our other training centers, Kirkwood Community College, to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to have the training and the skill set necessary to go out and fill those jobs. We need to also make sure that as we work with companies, we find ways to assist them in identifying and helping. And we're out there, Cedar Rapids has, for the last several years, had an economic development department. We never had that before. And now what we're doing is we have added researchers to that, where we're meeting with every existing industry in town to identify what they need, and then we're passing that information on in the form of a study to all the industries, all the people in the community, sharing that research that we funded through our staff so that they can fill the gaps. And people that are looking for jobs can find them. And I think there's a fine line where you can get too deep into this thing. But if we provide the research and the information over time, then I think there will be an increased effort in creating more workers for those job openings that exist throughout our community.
The public-private partnership needs to make sure that the city's development department coordinates all of the efforts with the Economic Alliance, ICAD in Iowa City, even the city of Hiawatha and Marion, and that we make sure that, because the private sector is giving money to those organizations to work on economic development, and we need to be at the table with them for everything we do. Public-private partnership, I suppose you could talk about, that's this building. The city built it, but we raised $8 million from the community, private citizens, to make sure we had a state-of-the-art library that is an economic development tool in and of itself and allows for meetings like this. I love this library. My wife and I were campaign co-chairs, so we were two of the 4 people that worked hard to raise the money for this, and she's on the board here, so I love coming in here every time. The TIF in Iowa, cities, communities have very few economic development opportunities. Tax increment financing is one of the only ones available. And as Monica mentioned, it was David Swenson, who's an economist at Iowa State, who is the expert in this area, and he did a report within the last year that said the Cedar Rapids has almost always used it effectively and wisely, and the dollar value of properties that we have that are under TIF compared to the properties that aren't under TIF, it's a very small percentage versus other communities that haven't used it so wisely. Some of them have almost half of their property were financed through TIF. It's an investment, and it requires jobs too, not just new buildings. It requires that those businesses have and create and keep and expand jobs. And if they don't do that, they don't get the benefit from it. And I think we're all going to see that benefit soon, because a lot of those TIF projects came up after the flood, and they're going to start coming back on the tax rolls full fare. And that should help us very dramatically.
We'll come back to you.
This is Doggy Dog competing for one mic. So, you know, government, I believe government should be there as a support system and look for ways to facilitate, but really main priority for government should be, especially city government, should be to find ways to increase public and private partnership. We have to look for ways to increase competition, because competition is exactly what leads to good quality. And having that quality, whether it's service, whether it's utility, whether it's transportation, no matter what it is, quality is what we all seek for. And we don't get quality when there is stagnation or where there is lack of competition. So that should be the government's main priority, is really looking to push for more competition.
The idea here, we have the ability now with our city to either continue in the way that we are or start really looking at ways to expand our base, bring more people to Cedar Rapids, make more people excited about the city, which lends itself to not finding different ways to charge the citizens and put a drain on citizens. And it's a certain portion of citizens that it really affects. And so I think that, without government involvement, city involvement, different things, I might not be standing here today. So throughout history, we walked a fine line with what kind of involvement we have, and whether it be financial or physical or land, all of those things are very important. I would say that if the city of Cedar Rapids started to focus on bringing youth to Cedar Rapids, excitement, things to do, things for families to do that are affordable, we would have a better idea of where we can go with the city and the things that we can accomplish, rather than coming up with different ways to charge the citizens. I think I'm the only person up here standing that does not agree with the traffic cameras, and there's a blog up, and we can get into that at some point. But I feel that if we're looking at too much involvement, that could be one of them. So just being honest, I think that at times we're too involved, but there's a place and a time for everything.
Here, Gary. He's dying for it.
Thank you. Well, that's a good question, and I think it needs several points to be addressed. Some people have mentioned bringing youth to the community and bringing employment here, and I have said in previous forums that I believe strongly that we need to use our colleges and universities to open up pipelines to other communities in the Midwest that kind of look like us in some respects, so that people come here from New York City, they'd have cultural shock. But if we get somebody from Minnesota or Kansas or Illinois or Missouri, I think we can recruit people here, and our colleges can do that and set up not only the educational programs and apprenticeship programs that would be beneficial, but we can work with the business community that they would have jobs here when they're completed their education. Along that line, I would also set up a business council, probably made up of retired CEOs who are getting tired of golfing and hanging around the clubhouse, and they'd like to have their talents come back and be useful to the community. I think they could be very helpful in developing programs like this. One of our council members, Scott Overland, has really been championing a neighborhood development corporation. I think that would be very beneficial to get into our neighborhoods and be able to reuse some of that property and to address housing needs for citizens of Cedar Rapids. I also think that when we talk about TIF, and people have spoken well about TIF in many regards, but we ought to use that for planning for the future. When this money starts coming back in, we should remember that our police and fire departments have had all that additional policing and fire coverage and they haven't had any increases in their staff, and so we should use that TIF money in a very succinct way to fund police and fire and allowable growth as it should occur.
We have to be very, very cautious when government gets involved in the marketplace. And there's a balancing act there of when is the appropriate level of influence that we want to provide or assist the developer or whatever the case is, and when do we do too much. I've been on the council now for 12 years, and we're just now starting to see some of the incentives that we provided 10 years ago when I was on the council are going to start coming into play. And we're going to see some nice increases in our evaluation that's coming from taxable increment financing. One of the things that I think we, just as an example, would be we had Westdale Mall. It had a taxable value of about $7 million. I was involved and have been involved in a number of economic development negotiations, but we worked out a situation that allowed that developer to go into Westdale and redevelop that property. Today, or by the end of this year, we should have about $60 million worth of valuation in that property. Are we going to get that money immediately? No, but we will eventually. And when that falls on to our tax rolls, that's a significant amount. And that's only 2/3 of the way done with the project. They anticipate the project to be a $90 million project. So we had a $7 million project or $7 million property. It's likely to be $90 million. Those are the kind of places where we need to make sure that we do look very closely and provide the right level of incentives in order to accomplish those kinds of goals. As it relates to the economic development equation for workforce, we have to be able to recruit people to Cedar Rapids. We need to make sure that we have a quality of life here that will bring people into our community, creating those places that they are going to like to live, work, and play. And that's some of the things that we've done over the course of the last 10 years is create those places like New Hope Market area, the Czech Village, the College District that's still under development, Medical Quarter area, Kingston Village, the Ellis area that will be developed. Those are places that people want to go to, and that's what draws people to a community.
We got 2 questions over here.
I've been standing for a while.
Go ahead.
Candidates,
All right,
I just
Linda.
want to take us back to that very first question on public violence in our community, and if you see it as a public health issue. I didn't get that. I didn't get it from you guys. One of the things I did hear is about policing the violence. So that's why I come back to ask you, do you see the public health in our community, not when I say public health, the violence in our community as a public health issue? And I say that because I did hear someone talk about policing. You can't police this violence because it's a public health issue. You want to speak to that, Gary?
Sure. Yes, I do. It is the short answer. And you know, the SET task force has been working with the Linn County Public Health Department and the Police Department to start looking at the numbers of in reference to violence for the community, which includes suicide and mental health issues as well. So we see this as a very critical issue. And you know, one of the things, seems like a diversion, but one of the, excuse me, one of the things that I learned over the years when we're talking about dealing with populations that may not look like us is that we need to gear up and have diversity in leadership as well. I think some of you know that at the Department of Correctional Services we started to do that, and many of you know the names and the faces of the many people that we put in promoted positions to help us understand what the people in the neighborhood were trying to tell us that wasn't always apparent to us. And so I'm pleased that we did that. I think that in order to address the mental health and public health issues associated with violence, we need to have people at the table that understand the community as well as anybody does and be able to work with them. And so I do agree that it is a public health issue.
Anybody else believe this is public health?
Sure.
Well, I think it's definitely a public health issue. And I think public health is physical health and mental health. And I think we have to always include both of those. I think that whenever you say health issue, all of us are taught, what's the preventative? How do we prevent these kinds of things? And, absolutely, I think that it has to be through inclusion, through communication, through giving opportunities to people. And really, as I think many of us said before, we've got to have an open heart and an open mind for what are the causes, what is going on. I think in my experience, you look at Cedar Rapids, we have a little bit of what's happening everywhere, whether it's Los Angeles or Chicago or New York City. We've got it here. And we have to look ourselves in the eye, in the mirror, and look at each other and say, we've got it here. And how do we work together to solve the issues? And one of the things that has always bothered me is where we say, well, we got to get a diversity of people. And sometimes what ends up happening is a few people get shouldered with this. I think we have to embrace diversity in all of its forms, whether we're talking about color, creed, ageism, sexism, whatever. And I think that instead of saying, oh, we got to do this diversity thing, we have to recognize there's extreme power in diversity. When we all get together and share different viewpoints, that there's power in that. And we can make a difference right here in Cedar Rapids. We can be the beacon for the rest of the nation.
This issue came to us in a presentation to the City Council about a study that was done by the CDC. And it was interesting because that was the first time it was tied, back to a health issue. I was privileged to attend a CDC conference in Atlanta with other members of public health and other parts representing the city. It was on walkability and health and walk-ons. And I wasn't sure how that would all work tied together. I personally believe it's definitely worth exploring the CDC angle to see if we qualify for any grants or any funding, because I learned something different that I thought, I didn't realize the CDC did those kind of efforts in health and ADA and other issues. And this one is, I think, if we can draw, and this is what I'm coming to, is we draw from that learning experience and their expertise and then put it to work that fits our community. And so we just had a meeting this week of our team, and we already have goals for the next 3 years to improve the walkability in this area through the schools, safe routes to schools, going after grants. So what we did was take that CDC effort and put it to work to fit our community. I'm definitely supporting that effort and would help support bringing them in if we could get them to do a grant program.
Violence has an impact on people's health. I don't think anybody would argue that. So to answer that question, I had the opportunity to be on a board with Darius Brown, who is the council member in Wilmington, Delaware, where the CDC did their report. It's not a very long report. It's about 15 pages long, so it's a very simple report. But it has some recommendations. What I found very interesting is if you took the SET task force document that we have currently and compared it, very similar recommendations. I think our SET task force actually had more recommendations than the recommendations that the Center for Disease Control had in their report there. What I think we're lacking in right now with the SET task force is the implementation plan. I'm involved with the National League of Cities, as I mentioned before, and they have a program called REAL. It's called Racial Equity and Leadership. And they have offered to come out and help us go through that SET task force and help us develop the implementation plan so that we can execute on that plan. Having the plan on the shelf doesn't help us a whole lot. We need to execute on it. And that's one of the things I would like to see us move forward with.
I would just say I agree with the comments from the other speakers. I really don't have anything additional to add, so I'll save time for another speaker.
Should we pass it down? Lemi?
Are many of you here familiar with the term PTSD? Battered women syndrome? These are real studies. These are real things that people have used in court to defend themselves. Are many of you familiar with the term PTSS?
Yes.
That term is post-traumatic slave syndrome. And if you look at it, a lot of the symptoms that are affecting African Americans in general. It's a great study. I would tell anybody to look into it. There are great studies being done all over the place, and I think this is something that should be studied and should be looked at, and it's very important. And it's not relegated to one specific community. As you've seen the violence taking place all over Cedar Rapids, it's not, it's specific to African Americans. And so what I would say now is we need to look at a way as a community to come together and ask, can this study actually happen? Because we need to tell the city council that's what we want to see happen. Bernard has a lot of information on that he shared with me, and I think if you guys take a look at it, it makes sense.
So, like everybody, I agree that NAU, of course, is a public health issue, and the way we address it is really we ought to go after the understanding. We can look at all the studies we want. We can look at all the set task force and all everything that we have put on, and Kris touched up on it. Having a plan that's on the shelf is not going to do anything. So it's really up to us to be able to be involved and really go after understanding. What understanding brings us, it brings us closer to solving the issue and actually asking the question how, instead of developing these plans or going after studies that just tolerates it and kind of sweeps it under the rug. Oh, we'll wait for someone else to come and address it. The time is now. We got to take charge and move on.
I have two questions. One for you, Mr. Olson. You had mentioned on the African, there are plenty of people, there are jobs on African not qualified people, but a lot of these jobs, they ask that question, do you know anyone who works here? And if you don't, then you don't get in as quickly. And to you, Mr. Hart, I heard you mention something about sidewalks. People like to walk, that's fine. I'm a homeowner. So who pays for those sidewalks to be put in the house?
It's important that we have the ability for everyone to have an opportunity to find a job. And again, I think I would be shocked if somebody asked that question, but it must be there. Do you know somebody that works here? I think that's kind of an interesting question, and I don't think it's a fair question. And so I think it's important that as we work as a city, that we work with our employers and those job openings that are all got their signs up and everything else. They're saying, well, you need to look at how you look at hiring people and how you work with people to put them in spot, because we can fill a lot of job openings that are there. On sidewalks, it's a part of our public health, it's part of getting to transportation to schools, etc. We know it has become a burden in some of the older neighborhoods because we are a city that has the core area with sidewalks, and then we had 2 decades where we had no sidewalks, and then all new projects since the mid-90s and into the 2000s have sidewalks. So we've got this sort of donut. We changed our policy. We used to have an assessment, 50-50 with the city. Now the city is going to pay for 100% of all the sidewalks in these core areas. It's a change in policy that was done 2 months ago. It's going to help getting into these older neighborhoods where it is an issue for paying for those sidewalks, but yet those sidewalks are important for people in the neighborhoods to be able to get to schools, to parks, and to transportation. And so I think we're listening, we understand what was happening, we've made the change, and that's how things happen.
The sidewalks is really, again, to make us a walkable community. It's great that the city is paying for that, because we can't have this where one house has a sidewalk and the next one doesn't. I've heard from lots of people that they have students who are walking a quarter of a mile in the street to go to Kennedy High School. That's a safety issue. We really have to provide a safe way for people, kids in particular, to get around in our community. So I'm happy that the city council has made that change in the policy, and I think we need to continue to have sidewalks in all of our neighborhoods.
And we're going to take another question here and 2 more here. We're going to hold your answers to a minute because we're glad
trying to build up certain areas, like downtown areas, New Orleans area, check everything. My question is a two-part question. How does neighborhoods fit into those economic plans of the city? And some of those questions some of the answers have already been answered. So my question again is, how do the neighborhoods fit into the economic plan that the city has to get invited downtown and bring things to the city for younger people to do? The second part of the question is, what will you do as mayor to ensure that you and the city council is making sure that everyone in this city feels involved, is engaged, and feel that their needs are being addressed by the Cedar Rapids City Council under your administration?
I can take that. Go ahead.
I think my opening comments said that it's time for us to expand development beyond downtown and Newbo. We need to take the best practices, the things we've learned that work there, and move them out throughout our community, into our neighborhoods. I'd love to see on the near northwest side, where the flood area where there are no homes now, I'd love to see soccer fields, a soccer complex, maybe a skate park. We need to get bodies there. We need to get traffic over there before there can be businesses that will invest in that area. That's an area that is certainly something the city could be involved in. Strengthening all of our neighborhoods, as I mentioned earlier, is so important. And in some neighborhoods, that's going to mean encouraging some businesses to come in there. Some it won't. The Neighborhood Finance Committee or Corporation to provide housing or loans, forgivable loans for people to fix up their homes will also help strengthen neighborhoods. How am I going to, all I can tell you is that my professional background and the almost 1,000 hours a year I've spent for the last 20 plus years serving this community, it's because I love the community, everyone in it, and the work I've done for the human service organizations that I've chaired, I really do have a deep understanding. And the city can't do it all, but I will do everything I can to represent everyone in the city. And when there are issues, I think I know the people to bring to the table to help solve them.
And I was the one that mentioned all the places, and the places are where people live. Some of them we have living in those places, but really the neighborhoods are where people live. And so one of the things that we can do from an economic development is make sure those neighborhoods are safe, they have quality housing, they have affordable housing, and there are people living there all across the board in terms of the types of housing available for them. So I think that's the important part of the economic development part of that is the housing that's in those neighborhoods and making those neighborhoods safe. And if we have the Safe CR program that helps prevent nuisance properties from existing, that helps the neighborhood as well. As it relates to engagement, that's one of the things that I've been doing since I've been on the council for the last 12 years. I have quarterly meetings with residents, and I have these council communications that I have where neighbors host their neighbors in the meeting. And it's very informal, but I've had an opportunity to meet thousands of citizens and get their feedback on issues that we have going on in our community. And that's been really valuable to me and helping set public policy as I've been on the council. And I would see myself doing that as mayor as well.
Well, that's a very important question. And I want to, again, talk about the development of the neighborhood network that exists today. I had a strong part to play in that, and I respect the neighborhoods, and I think that they bring strength and vitality to our city if they're maintained and if they're given an opportunity to be part of the economic development of the city. I'll give you an example of the social and economic capital that we need to put into the neighborhoods. One of the programs we instituted was the VITA program, Volunteer Income Tax Assistance. That program brought $3 million a year into the neighborhoods that needed it most. That was an economic shot in the arm because they spent that money. They didn't save it to put it in a bank. And then we mentioned previously the Neighborhood Development Corporation and how important that's going to be to the development of those neighborhoods. I want to quickly mention the Ellis Boulevard corridor, which has been designated a business corridor by both the state and the city, and we need to get there.
Well, It's one of the reasons I'm running for mayor. You know, after the flood, we had to just nose to the grindstone and figure out the inundated area, which I call Tier 1. People lost everything, small businesses were ruined, and we needed to spend a lot of time on that. To me, Tier 2 and Tier 3, Tier 2 is kind of an older part of our community that a lot of times doesn't have sidewalks, and really a lot of the streets are in pretty darn bad shape. But we can't ignore any neighborhood, and that's why I'm running. And how do you fix that? With infrastructure. We get the streets figured out. We get street lights, looking better. A lot of these neighborhood groups these guys are talking about don't exist out as you get out another mile out. And so we have to work with everybody. I've pledged to the people I've door knocked to, and I've tried to get around to as many as possible, that I would be in meetings in all of the neighborhoods, not just those that have neighborhood groups. So 2 times a month, a mayor out there listening. You got to lead by example.
Thank you. That was a very good question. One of the things that we got to do is we really got to get over our obsession with the one thing that we have done, or some of the things that we have created, such as, I'll use Nubo as an example. Every neighborhood cannot be the new Nubo. We really need to start looking beyond that and get moving to create and establish neighborhoods that have their own unique identities and can start to get audiences and start to get the neighbors excited about being in their neighborhood. And as mayor, one of my first plans will be to go on listening to it. So that will be my priority as one of my first 100 days. Going on and listening to it, making sure that every single voice is heard in this city, and that if people want to contribute and to make sure that they have the chance to do so by sitting down with their mayor and fixing what they think the city needs to fix.
I will do everything I can to be active and involved in my community, and I try to do that now, whether I'm mayor or not, no matter what happens, to be active, and I encourage everybody to be, because that's the whole idea of this campaign, for all of us to get involved in our community. I would try to create an environment and a culture that people will want to be a part of, to bring businesses here. The other thing is, you got a black-owned business downtown, Harold's. This is a guy who's now going to take every ticket that's sold and get $5 so a kid in Cedar Rapids can have a hot lunch. These are small things that business could be doing, and that's the kind of thing that I'm looking for in Cedar Rapids.
I think let me get right on. Every neighborhood is different, and so one plan does not fit all. And I think that by working individually with each neighborhood, we can develop a plan that fits. The program that was just announced to develop entrepreneurs for small businesses in the neighborhoods, working with GoDaddy and others, is a tremendous step forward. Neighborhood finance will provide, corporation will provide the funding necessary for small business. And then we just need to become more engaged in that process throughout, whether it's the city government or individuals in neighborhoods, to make each neighborhood successful no matter what they become, as far as their theme or what they want that neighborhood to be. Secondly, you talked about inclusion. We have done a poor job in our hundreds of opportunities to be on commissions and boards and task force. We need to expand the base, do a better job of appointing people, making it easier to get on those boards and commissions so that everybody can get involved in the community. And we can do that. That's easy to do as a city council. We just need to get together, get people involved, and make it happen.
So regarding the youth in our community, well, that's something we touched on it, but I think some of the issues that we face is one that we don't have enough after-school programs or summer programs or week programs in general to keep our youth active in our community. And two, if we did, a majority of these programs cost way too much money for our lower-income families, or a majority of these crimes and these gun violence comes from in the lower-income families. So how do each of you plan to create and make these programs available and affordable mainly for our community?
Well, they just talked about raising $8 million. I mean, we spend $3 million a year on golf. We have a hotel downtown that pays for the golf and it pays for the ice arena. I think we need to really sit down and look at the city budget The funds are there. The idea for them to tell you that it's not, or where are we going to get this from, or how is this magically going to happen? It's there. The communication has to be there, and we have to make a conservative effort as a group to say, this is what we want. And what we have to do as a community is say, we're not going to wait on you. This is what we want to see happen. This is what we want in our community. There's no senior center since 2008. There's no reason for that. The idea now is for the community to wake up, everyday people, get your lunch pails, get down the boat, and get involved.
Jorel, not firing me up. I gotta tell you. tough act to follow. But you know, to echo that, and also as a youth, I had everything growing up in this city. I mean, when I was the neighborhood that I grew up in, we had everything within distance. The library was there, the YMCA was there, and after-school programs were there, and some were public, others were put on by organizations. But really, Jorel again hit it on the head. We need to sit down and look at our priorities. What really matters? If we want to attract and invest in our youth, that should be our priority. We should be looking at investing in community centers that put on public programming, education, make opportunities available so that kids who aren't fortunate enough to be able to be on club teams or traveling teams have an opportunity to come and engage and still get to know their neighbors.
Well, I think that every single youth, member of our youth in this community is human potential. I mean, they're our future. And so we've got to invest in them. It's so much smarter to invest way in the beginning. And if you look at that, that's why it's so key for the new mayor to make sure that we work with the school board and keep neighborhood schools. We also need to invest in more community centers. And I think that all of these things are really incredibly important. We're in a library right now that is closed one day of the weekend, and our library on the west side is closed the other day. I'm absolutely opposed to that. We have gorgeous libraries, and they need to be open full time. In fact, we should add hours. As a kid, that was many hours for me. So, you know, I just think there are we have so many possibilities here. We just need to make sure we're working on them, using them, and it becomes something that is front and center for us. I think you make a great point. Thank you.
That was a good question, and part of what I understand from your question is, how are we going to serve those kids that are underserved that we don't always reach? And there's a lot of wonderful programs in this community funded by United Way and other organizations that make good kids better, and they give some kids an opportunity to have structure in the summertime, but oftentimes we don't reach down deep enough to find the children that are on the verge of foster care or already in it, that are troubled. Maybe their parents, one or both of them, are in prison. They're being raised by a grandparent or an aunt. And we need to get to those children with positive programming and give them an opportunity to succeed. One of the things that concerns me, and we worked with this on the SET task force, is that with all the programs we have, there's really not a pass-off point from one program to the other. There's no set of competencies or social skills that we measure so that when we take an age group from 4 and 5 up to 6 and 7 or up to 10, we ought to know that we are continually on a pathway to success, that when they hit 18, they're going to do something positive rather than be in the criminal justice system. Good question.
We certainly need to invest in our youth. There were more opportunities, I think, for most of us growing up. You're almost all younger than I am, but I did have those opportunities in my hometown. We need to develop them here. First thing we need to do, though, is make sure that all of the nonprofits that are providing services now and programs for youth are working together and coordinating that. I'm pretty certain we would find that there are programs out there that are being underutilized because they're not getting the word out and the message out. I helped raise money to build this library. I would be certainly willing to raise money to build a youth center, and if we could somehow coordinate that to have it be part of a senior center, think this community deserves that and would support it. Thank you.
I was the one that brought up the youth programming when we talked about that, and I have a passion for that because I far rather hire a recreation program director than another 5 police officers. And that's ultimately what we have to do. And we have to come up with the priorities to make that happen and provide those funds for those programs to be in place. Because I do believe that that's part of the reason why we cut those programs 25 years ago. And imagine that, the problems that we're having are with people that are 18 to 25 years old. I think there's a direct correlation there between that. And so I think that's one of the things that I would focus on, is making sure that we set that as a priority so that we do have some of those programs in place. And we set them up so that they're affordable, and so we have a sliding scale based upon need or any other way. There's ways to do that so that we can get those kids in the programs appropriately.
I think it is setting priorities, and we can probably work very creatively to find that funding, I think, when that priority is set. Jorel, right on. And so what we need to do is we have the schools going their way, we have different organizations going their way, the city's going a different way. We just need to work together, because then we can double and expand or triple and expand the resources and make sure we get to everyone that needs those activities and the ability to have something to do, whether they can pay or not. We have many of our kids in the schools on free lunch, and we found a way to do that. We just need to find a way to put that into recreational programs, put that into other areas of the community, and we can find the funding if we come up with a plan and work together and put all the resources together to make that a good place no matter what. So it's a great question. Next.
Last question.
Thank you. I have to listen to what all of you have said. And I understand the changes in Cedar Rapids.
Yeah, we can't hear very well.
The movement, talking about it, all these different things, yes, that is helpful. But the question is, we can create programs. If people we hire and put in a position cannot relate to those children or the people they're working with, how are we going to change? We got people, the DHS and a whole bunch of rest of them, they don't understand black culture, Mexican culture, whatever. Criminal justice police is the same way here. You know, they treat people different over here at Wilton Heights while than they do on the northwest side. And you look at all this, there's no collaborative nowhere. And long as we got division and Cedar Rapids, how you ever gonna have unity? How we ever gonna have qualified people who work with people who have an understanding and willing to listen what you need to say. Listen, how are we gonna create those problems around all these beautiful hills? That's my question.
Are you going to go, Scott?
You finished that question with the right answer. You have to listen and find ways to get people involved in all neighborhoods, and each neighborhood is different. And so by listening and putting together that right team or the right people to work with our youth is very important, because you do have to identify, and that's a mentor program, that's whatever it is, you have to identify that you feel comfortable with who you're working with. And so it is listening and it's finding that right effort to make it happen. So it's a great question.
We have to go.
Okay, so I was born in Cedar Rapids in 1987. I'll keep this brief. I'm biracial. My mother is white, my father is black. I descend from indentured servants and former slaves. I can't tell you how important it is for you to see someone in those positions. One of my first principals I've experienced was Bernard, and she's an African-American woman, and that was very huge to me. But growing up as a young child, my father took me to the side and had conversations with me that I don't know if these gentlemen up here, maybe Lemi, had the same kind of conversation, but my father even said to me one time, Jorel, my life would have been very different if I was your color. And you don't understand what that feels like until you felt it. And you can't understand how it feels to be him until you felt that. And it's deep. It is very deep. And it's hard to express it so shortly how deep it is. But getting people into those positions is huge. So in high school, looking at programs to develop these kids on fast tracks to being teachers, police officers, those are the things that we really need to look at. That's a great question.
Well, I think, number one is, the mayor and the council provide leadership. So they say we've got to not have this program. I don't think that's the right way. But we've got to make sure that these youth have the opportunity, are involved, and are able to achieve certain levels of, whatever. We make it general enough, and then the people putting the programs, we got to check back. And if it's not working, we want to change it. I think the biggest thing is not just an open mind, but an open heart. That what you always do is have also an open ear. And that's why I'm talking about going around the community. A lot of times people do not want to, sometimes staff have said, hey, we'll go out there. No, I think the mayor has to be out there with an open heart and an open mind and open ears. And you tell us, if it's not working, we look into it.
Thanks, Dino, for the question. You and I have known each other for 30 years and have talked frankly many times. And I can tell you that when I developed the at-risk youth program, the people that I looked for in that program looked like the kids that were going to be in the program. Jason Edwards, Willie Guy, James Moses. They were all people that could relate to the children and make that program successful. And I hear you when you say, are you going to hire people and put them in places of leadership that can understand and relate to the rest of us what the issues are in the community that Jorel had mentioned. And so I think it's very important. You can talk to people at the Department of Correctional Services that I have put in promoted positions over the years. Am I done or do I have 30 seconds? 30 seconds. Okay, over the years. And you know the names and the faces. Of course, Virgil Gooding is gone now, but was a friend of mine and counseled me repeatedly on these issues, and you know he would. But you can go to the people that are still there and they can tell you that Gary Hinzman is a person of his word, and if he says he's going to do something, he'll do it.
There you go. It's very true that there is a big disconnect. Or a city wants to label itself as a progressive city or want to take on that title. We sure are very segregated, and we really got to take steps to make sure that that disconnect is solved and that gap gets closed. And the way we do that is we engage and we get to know our neighbors better. This isn't just an issue that the government's going to fix for us. It starts with you, it starts with me. When we get to know our neighbor, then we're able to help them better.
This community needs to be more welcoming and engaged. We need to be more diverse. If any of you were here, I think it was last March, in this library, we had the cultural celebration, and it was incredible. It was amazing to see how many different cultures, people living here in this community. It was exciting, and I think people who were here were excited about it and want to help and bring more and more people. We won't solve a workforce issue, our development issue, until if we're not welcoming of anyone in the country and from other countries. If we have city employees who need training to better understand and treat people appropriately, everyone in our community, then we have to do that. We absolutely have to do that, because everyone here deserves to be treated fairly.
Two pieces to that. One, I think the hiring practices, we need to try to hire a more diverse workforce, and so hiring practices, that's the short term, as well as looking at training programs for existing employees. One of the reasons why I brought up the mentor program is we have a lot of employees who are going to be retiring. If they can go out and mentor some of these kids in our community and tell them about the job opportunities in our community, in the city organization, that provides them a little knowledge about what positions could be like for them in the future. So that could help us create some more diversity and have a better understanding of people in our community if we can bring those kids into our workforce as a city long term. That's a long-term solution. That's not something that's going to happen overnight. Short-term, work on our hiring practices, try to bring more diversity to it, and training of the employees who are working with the kids who are in our various programs.
And we will take our last question, and then we'll give candidates an opportunity to close.
I try to be brief on this, but I would like to ask if any of you are willing to restrict the sale of weapons within the Cedar Rapids city limits. Hear, hear.
Well, I guess the question probably lends itself to another question, because I'm not sure what authority we have in Iowa in order to be able to do that. So my guess is that we would have to have some kind of legislative action in order to be able to limit the sale of weapons in Cedar Rapids based upon my understanding of the law.
Yes. I'm not a hunter, so I didn't grow up around guns. My father-in-law is a world duck calling champion, just for trivia. So they would push back on the hunting stuff, but having guns they scare me to death. And so whatever the city could do, certainly we need to enforce the gun rules that are in place now and make sure that we're doing everything we can to get illegal guns off the streets. But if there were things we could do to restrict guns in Cedar Rapids, I would vote for that.
I think we'd all like to restrict guns in some way. The Iowa legislature is going the exact opposite direction right now and making it easier for people to get guns. They're making it more difficult for the sheriff to deny permits. He almost has to give them. So it's a really difficult issue, and I think if the mayor or the council tried to restrict guns, we would find ourselves in trouble with the legislature, and it would probably be a matter that would evolve into the courts, and it'd be difficult for us to defend. The real issue, and I've said this at all the forums, and now you have me again tonight talking about home rule and local control, and the legislature is headed the other direction. As a mayor, I would be very strong in advocating that we bring coalitions of people together. I found out working with neighborhood associations, if you meet each other's goals one at a time and become strong as a coalition, you can accomplish just about anything. We need to do that on home rule and local control.
The legislature has gone just in absolutely the other direction. And I think mayors today and going forward are going to have to speak up for their communities. And I think in Iowa we have a real disconnect between people maybe who live in rural areas, and if you shoot off a gun, you might hit a tree or a corn stalk. But in the city, you're very, very likely to hit someone and harm them. And so it's a very, very different situation here. And when I look at it, we have hunters in our family. But I think that some of the real basic things about like registration and all those, we've thrown so many of those out the window. I believe in home rule, as Gary has talked about, but I think we have to go further than that in terms of there are things that you want to fight for your city, and I think that's going to be imperative to do that. But I also think that what we have to do is band together to fight for our state.
I'm not 100% on this, but I believe there are some larger cities who implemented something similar to the question that you've asked, Seattle being the example that comes to my mind. We, as a city, we really should evaluate where we are and how much of a plague that issue is, and also be realistic and consider the legalities and actually what types of powers that we do have, and then work within those limits, but not only just consider the conventional ways, and also take a look at unconventional ways that we're able to work together to be able to restrict them. We can't prevent people from getting access, but we can certainly find ways to work together to find solutions.
That would be the main thing. I think that, you know, that it is an option or ever came up, I don't think that I would be opposed to it. I think that we as a city should look at what's best for us and what's best for the citizens. And I would like November 7th, I want you to vote for me, but I'm in favor of a good old vote. I think that this is something that we should talk about as a city and a community and try to come to a census.
We definitely have to work within the guidelines of state and federal laws, but as we found out with fireworks, you know, we can make a difference. Even though the state rule is allowing it, we have to make a difference to them. We need to be creative, we need to work around it, we need to find ways to restrict the sales and registration and work within the law just to tighten it down, where if you have a gun or you're selling guns or using guns, it's not fun in Cedar Rapids. Now that means we may not be able to stop them, but we can make it difficult and hard to get weapons, even though they'll still be illegal weapons. We just need to work within the law together, and as we've done now with fireworks finally, just make it tougher and tougher, even though the state has gone in that direction.
You just say standing and start your minute to close it out.
Was that 1 minute, Karl?
1 minute.
Okay.
I'm going to make this very short. You know, I feel with my background of proven leadership and knowledge and skills, you know, I'm ready to serve and stand forward as your mayor. I have made a commitment that when elected, I will retire from my business and devote the time necessary, as I've seen Ron Corbett do for this great city, the time he has spent. It is well more than a part-time job and needs this effort, especially initially out of the areas that we've discussed tonight. There's many things that we can do as a city, and the mayor provides that leadership. But the one thing I've learned in my 6 years on the city council is that I'm one vote. And if I can't build consensus and find a way to find a solution, nothing gets passed. And we've watched the chaos in Washington, D.C. We've watched the chaos at the state. We do not want that in Cedar Rapids, because we do a good job of working together. And so what I'm asking is, I want to work with you, and for us to be successful as a city council and a city, you need to participate with us, and we can make some of these things happen. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
I'm ready to serve. I'm ready to be your mayor. I was born and raised in Cedar Rapids, as you guys know, and I love this city. I don't plan on going anywhere else, as I've stated over and over. The idea here is to grow this base, improve our tax system so we have a bigger foundation to pull from and less money to tax our citizens, or different ways to kind of tax our citizens. I think Cedar Rapids has the opportunity now to be more inclusive, exciting, and innovative, and that's what I'm trying to bring to the table. November 7th, I would love for you to vote for me.
There's a lot I could say, but since we only have a minute, I just want to let you know I am here also ready to serve, but most importantly, here to embrace change and create opportunity. And just want to advise you all, if you haven't made up your mind yet, take a chance on a young guy, because fresh perspective is exactly what we need.
Thanks to everybody who's here, and thanks to the organizers. You know, we have a great city manager and a wonderful city staff doing a lot of management things, but this is a leadership position. And so I want to tell you that as your mayor, I would be your ambassador out there fighting for Cedar Rapids at the state legislature and in DC. I would be the catalyst to get things going. Many of the programs and ideas that we just heard here tonight. I would be the convener, getting people together, organizations like One Strong and people in every neighborhood together to hear their ideas. I would also be the spark plug, because things get stalled and you gotta have somebody that'll get it going again. You know, I would also be the scout, and I'd be looking in every corner of every neighborhood for people to put on boards and commissions, because that's what we really need to do. We need to make sure they reflect our community. But most of all, I would be that person who would work together with our city manager and staff, with all the citizens, and most importantly with our elected council, who you all elect, to make sure that only the best possible things happen for Cedar Rapids. Thank you.
Thank you for being here this evening and listening to us and making your own decisions about who you think would be the best mayor in the future. And thank you to One Strong for organizing this event and inviting us here as well. I believe that my experience of running large and complex government organizations, having national leadership programs that I've been in charge of, the president of many of them, and I have developed programs at the state and the national and the international level, and I'm competing with that train, but we'll get through it. And I'm looking forward to providing that same type of leadership at the city level as your next mayor. I have lobbied Congress, I have lobbied the legislature, we have made things happen that people thought couldn't, and I think we can bring that same characteristic to Cedar Rapids in a way that all of you would be proud of. My name is Gary Hinzman. I'll be on the ballot November 7th, and I'd ask you to vote for me.
I firmly believe that my professional background, my leadership skills, and my service to this community make me uniquely qualified to help lead Cedar Rapids in the years to come. This really is a vote about the next leader, someone who has given back for the last 25 years solely out of serving the community. And the beauty of this is it's local. This is a local job, and so you're going to see me around. You'll see me at the grocery store, you'll see me at the library, you'll see me. Share your ideas. Well, I want to hear from you all the time. That's really important, and I believe that so much that one of the first things I will do as mayor is to establish a mayor's youth council. So we have a group of young people that I can meet with on a regular basis to get their thoughts and issues and ideas, and probably set up a mayor's senior council, which I'll be part of that pretty soon, at my age, because we really do want to understand what's going on and what's in your mind, and I'm really excited about this because I know that the future of Cedar Rapids is very bright when we all work together. Thank you.
I'm the most prepared to be your next mayor. I'm the most prepared from the 12 years of experience. I have a track record. You can look at my record. I've been involved with our community for that 12 years, plus many years before that with not-for-profit organizations and living and operating a business in Cedar Rapids. I'm the most prepared to help identify those quality of life initiatives that we need to have in our community to attract people to our community, to live, work, and play here. I'm the most prepared from an understanding of how to get the most out of your tax dollars. It's your money, not mine. And how to use our budget appropriately so that we get the most out of it. I'm the most prepared to work with our neighboring communities so that we can figure out ways that we can collaborate with them, because we're all in this together and we need to work with them as well as work on our own. I'm the most prepared to be your next mayor. I'd appreciate your vote on November 7th.
Thank you.
Well, it's about time for us to get out of here. And thank you for your applause. I'd just like to thank the Cedar Rapids Public Library again. Sorry about bringing out over with me out here as quickly as we can. And they said this could not be done. They said the citizens could not directly talk to their people running for office and do it in a respectful manner. We proved them wrong. We made history tonight. We did a great job. Cedar Rapids is the microcosm of America. If we change America, if we change here, we can change America. I would like to thank Theory Cassell, Lemi Tilahun, Karl, and Breeanna, and our wonderful candidates for coming out and also